What if the qualities we're taught to admire, honesty, loyalty, modesty, are exactly the qualities that leave you powerless in rooms where power is actually being won and lost? Picture a finance minister who throws the most spectacular party Europe has ever seen to prove his loyalty to his king, and is arrested the very next morning. Picture a 19th century showman who hires a stranger to lay bricks on a street corner for no reason at all, and draws 1,000 curious New Yorkers into his museum by lunchtime. Picture a Mongol leader offered peace and trade by a neighboring empire, insulted instead, and who responds by erasing that empire from the map within a year. History is full of these moments, where the person who understood the real rules of power won, and the person who played by the rules they were taught lost everything. Here's the myth: almost everyone believes that being good, hard-working, and straightforward is enough to win influence, respect, and position. Play fair, do good work, and the right people will notice. Robert Greene, a former Hollywood story developer and journalist, spent years researching 3,000 years of history, tracing the strategies of figures like Machiavelli, Sun Tzu, Talleyrand, and Mao, to write the 48 Laws of Power. It's one of the most read and most controversial books ever written on the subject, praised by strategists and CEOs, and criticized by others as a manual for manipulation and ruthlessness. We'll let you draw your own conclusions about where the line sits. What's undeniable is how consistently these patterns repeat across history, in courts, boardrooms, and battlefields alike. Here's the central idea. Power operates by its own laws, mostly unspoken, and the people who rise and stay risen are the ones who study those laws deliberately instead of stumbling through them by instinct. In this video, we'll walk through 9 of the book's most striking laws. We'll look at why making your boss look brilliant matters more than being brilliant yourself. Why silence can win an argument that words never could. Why absence sometimes builds more respect than presence ever will. And why history's most enduring powers were the ones flexible enough to never be pinned down. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. Never outshine the master. Most people believe that impressing the people above them is the fastest route to advancement, so they work to display every ounce of talent they have, every chance they get. Greene argues this instinct, left unchecked, can quietly destroy you. Nicolas Fouquet, finance minister to young King Louis XIV, threw the most lavish party France had ever witnessed, a banquet designed entirely to flatter his king and secure his position. Every course, every fountain, every firework was meant to say, "Look how devoted I am to you." Instead, the party backfired completely. As guests marveled at Fouquet's brilliance, taste, and connections, Louis felt something else entirely: humiliation. The next morning, Fouquet was arrested and spent the final 20 years of his life in solitary confinement in a mountain prison. Compare that to the astronomer Galileo, who faced a similar problem with far less power. Needing the patronage of the wealthy Medici family, he didn't just hand over a scientific discovery. When he spotted the moons of Jupiter, he tied the finding directly to the Medici family crest, framing the 4 moons as cosmic proof of the Medici's divine importance. He didn't outshine his patrons, he made them shine. Cosimo II rewarded him with a lifetime salary as court philosopher on the spot. The exercise: the next time you want to impress someone with real power over your future, a boss, a mentor, an investor, resist the instinct to showcase your own brilliance directly. Instead, find a way to make your work reflect well on them specifically. Talent doesn't guarantee favor. Making the person above you feel secure in their own brilliance does. Chapter 2. Don't overtrust friends. Learn to use enemies. Most people assume friends are automatically safer allies than enemies, since friends already like you. Greene flips this assumption on its head, and the history he cites is uncomfortable but consistent. In 1807, the French statesman Talleyrand decided Napoleon was leading France toward ruin and needed a partner to help topple him. He didn't turn to a friend. He turned to Joseph Fouché, the head of the secret police, a man who had once tried to have Talleyrand assassinated. Talleyrand's reasoning was sharp. A former enemy, given the chance to prove himself, works harder to earn trust than a friend who already assumes he has it, and their alliance carries no messy emotional history to cloud it. The unlikely partnership worked, generating real momentum against the emperor. Mao Zedong took this even further as a deliberate strategy. During the war against Japan, some of his fellow communist leaders wanted to sit the fight out and preserve their strength. Mao insisted on engaging the Japanese directly, arguing that facing a formidable enemy was the exact training his underprepared army needed. He later told a Japanese visitor who tried to apologize for the invasion, "Should I not thank you instead?" Without a worthy opponent, he explained, no group grows stronger. The exercise: think about someone you've written off as an opponent, and ask honestly whether their skepticism of you is actually sharpening your work, or whether there's a version of this rivalry that could become useful cooperation instead. Friends can grow complacent, or turn on you out of envy you never saw coming. A former rival, given a real reason to prove their loyalty, often has more to prove and more reason to deliver. Chapter 3. Conceal your intentions. Most people, especially when negotiating or pursuing a goal, believe honesty about their objectives builds trust. Greene argues that revealing your real intentions too early simply hands other people the exact information they need to block you. The American robber baron Jay Gould perfected what Greene calls the pattern. He built a company that threatened Western Union's telegraph monopoly, and when Western Union bought him out to make him go away, he simply started a new competing company. They bought that one out too. By the third time, the directors of Western Union were so conditioned to expect a routine payout that they didn't notice Gould had shifted his real goal entirely. He staged a sudden takeover and seized total control of the company that had twice paid him to disappear. Greene also points to false sincerity as one of the most effective tools for hiding real intentions. People instinctively trust what looks like an open, honest gesture and rarely question it closely. Napoleon's minister Talleyrand was famous for this. He'd let slip an apparent secret or personal confidence, and the other person, flattered by the trust, would let their guard down and reveal something real in return. The exercise before your next negotiation or major ask: decide in advance what you will and will not reveal about your actual goal, and notice how much more room you have to maneuver when the other side is reacting to what you've shown them, not what you actually want. The moment your opponent knows exactly what you want, they know exactly how to stop you. Guard your intentions the way you'd guard anything else worth having. Chapter 4. Court attention at all costs. Most people assume that quiet, steady competence eventually gets noticed on its own merits. Greene argues that in a crowded world, being unnoticed is far more dangerous than being controversial. P.T. Barnum learned this lesson the hard way early in his career, when his own boss started a rumor that Barnum was a notorious accused murderer, nearly getting him lynched by an angry mob before revealing it was all a publicity stunt. Furious, Barnum demanded an explanation. "It was all for our good," his boss told him. "All we need to ensure success is notoriety." Barnum never forgot it. Later, running his own museum, he once paid a random beggar to spend an entire day silently laying bricks down a city block and picking them back up again, for no explained reason whatsoever. By the end of the day, Over 1,000 curious New Yorkers had followed the mystery straight into his museum, buying tickets just to make sense of what they'd witnessed. Barnum understood something most people resist: attention itself. Even confused or skeptical attention is a form of currency, a mysterious act, an unexplained gesture, a controversial claim. All of it pulls people in far more reliably than quiet, forgettable competence ever will. The exercise: look at how you currently present your work, whether it's a project, a business, or your own reputation, and ask whether it's memorable enough to actually be talked about, or whether it's simply competent and easily forgotten. Being ignored is the real risk. A little bit of intrigue done deliberately will always outperform being merely quietly. Chapter 5. Win through actions, never through argument. Most people, when they believe they're right, reach for words: a longer explanation, a more forceful argument, one more attempt to convince. Greene argues, this is almost always the weaker move, because arguments create resistance, while demonstrations rarely do. Architect Sir Christopher Wren once designed a town hall whose mayor grew nervous, convinced the second floor wasn't structurally sound, and demanding 2 extra support columns be added. Wren knew, as the engineer, that the columns were completely unnecessary. Rather than argue the point and risk offending a patron, he simply built them, exactly as requested. Only years later did workmen on scaffolding discover the columns didn't actually touch the ceiling. They were dummies. The mayor felt reassured. Wren's original design stood unaltered, doing all the real work by itself. Nikita Khrushchev used a version of the same principle under far more pressure. Mid-speech, denouncing Stalin's crimes, a heckler shouted, "You were a colleague of Stalin's. Why didn't you stop him?" Khrushchev, unable to spot the heckler, simply barked, "Who said that?" Silence. Nobody moved. After several unbearable seconds, he said quietly, "Now you know why I didn't stop him." No argument on earth could have made the point as viscerally as that silence did. The exercise: the next time you're tempted to win someone over with a longer, more persuasive explanation, look for a way to demonstrate your point physically or experientially instead, and notice how much less resistance you meet. People rarely change their mind because they lost an argument. They change it when they feel something they can't argue with. Chapter 6. Use absence to increase respect. Most people assume that staying constantly visible, always available, always in the room, is the safest way to maintain influence. Greene argues that constant presence quietly erodes your value, the same way any resource becomes less precious the more abundant it is. The medieval troubadour Guillaume de Boulogne fell deeply in love with a noblewoman named Guilhelma, who returned his affection completely. Curious about a friend's description of the sweetness that follows reconciling after a quarrel, Guillaume deliberately faked anger, cut off contact, and disappeared from the castle entirely, even during festivals. Guilhelma, driven half-mad by his sudden absence, sent messenger after messenger, desperate for any explanation. His scarcity had transformed steady, comfortable affection into something urgent and consuming. The same principle scales far beyond romance. Anything constantly available starts to feel ordinary, no matter how genuinely valuable it is. A leader who is always accessible, a brand that never stops advertising, a person who never says no, all become part of the background noise. Strategic withdrawal, done at the right moment, resets that entirely, reminding people what they actually valued about your presence in the first place. The exercise: identify one relationship or role where you've become constantly, unremarkably available, and experiment with one deliberate, well-timed absence. Then notice what it does to how you are perceived when you return. Constant presence breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds indifference. Absence used deliberately is what makes people actually notice you again. Chapter 7. Know who you're dealing with. Most people assume everyone will respond to pressure, insult, or a bad deal roughly the same way. Greene argues, this assumption gets people destroyed because some opponents are far more dangerous than their outward calm suggests. In 1219, the rising Mongol leader Genghis Khan sent a peaceful trade offer to Muhammad, the powerful Shah of a wealthy empire stretching from Turkey to Afghanistan. Muhammad, viewing this upstart from the east as beneath him, ignored the offer, then had a governor seize and execute Khan's next diplomatic caravan. When Khan sent ambassadors to formally request the governor be punished, Muhammad had one of them beheaded and sent the others back publicly humiliated. Khan's reply was simple: "You have chosen war." Within a year, using speed and tactics no one in the region had seen before, he had crushed Muhammad's much larger army, seized his capital, and shattered his empire completely. Muhammad had badly misjudged exactly who he was dealing with. The lesson isn't only about obvious threats. Greene points out that some of the most dangerous people are slow to anger and easy to underestimate right up until the moment you've genuinely offended them, and by then, it's already too late to take it back. The exercise before dismissing, insulting, or lowballing anyone, whether a competitor, a colleague, or a stranger, take a beat to actually assess who you're dealing with, rather than assuming they'll react the way you expect. Never assume the person in front of you is exactly as harmless or as predictable as they first appear. Some of them are Genghis Khan, and you won't find out until it's too late. Chapter 8. Despise the free lunch. Most people are drawn instinctively toward anything offered for free: a gift, a discount, a favor with no stated price. But Greene argues that almost nothing valuable is genuinely free, and a real cost usually shows up later as obligation, compromise, or quiet manipulation. Greene describes two character types worth avoiding and avoiding becoming. The greedy fish sees only numbers, treats every relationship as a transaction, and alienates the very allies they need, making them easy prey for con artists dangling the promise of easy money. The bargain demon obsesses over squeezing out the lowest possible price on everything, wasting far more time and dignity hunting for deals than the savings are ever actually worth, and often ending up with something shoddy that costs more to fix later. What both types miss is that money spent deliberately and generosity given strategically function as genuine tools of power, buying independence, freedom from obligation, and real loyalty from the people around you. This connects to something deeper. The powerful understand that paying full, fair price for what matters keeps them free of the tangled debts, guilt, and quiet control that come attached to anything offered for free. The exercise the next time you're offered something free or unusually cheap, whether a favor, a gift, or a deal, pause and ask what invisible obligation might be attached, and decide deliberately whether that's a trade you actually want to make. Nothing that matters is really free. Pay fairly for what's genuinely worth having, and you'll stay free of the strings attached to what only look that way. Chapter 9. Assume formlessness. Most people, once they find a strategy that works, repeat it as rigidly as possible, believing consistency itself is a form of strength. Greene's final law argues that rigidity is actually one of the most dangerous positions you can be in, because a fixed shape is simply something your enemies can study and eventually defeat. Ancient Sparta built an entire civilization around exactly one skill war. Every Spartan boy was taken from his family at 7 and drilled relentlessly in combat discipline and nothing else. It worked brilliantly for generations, producing the most feared infantry in the ancient world. But when Sparta finally won its long war against Athens and inherited an empire it had never trained to actually govern, its total rigidity became a fatal weakness. Spartans who knew only warfare had no tools for politics or administration, and their tightly conquered empire began crumbling within years, because the very discipline that had made them unbeatable on the battlefield left them completely unable to adapt off of it. Athens, by contrast, had built its power on trade and constant adaptation, responding to each new problem by inventing new social and political forms rather than repeating an old formula. Greene's argument is that no single strategy, however successful, stays effective forever, because your opponents study and adapt to whatever pattern you keep repeating. The exercise: identify one strategy or approach you've relied on successfully for years, and deliberately ask what you'd do differently if that exact approach suddenly stopped working tomorrow. The moment you become predictable, you become manageable. Stay fluid enough that no one can fully pin down your next move, including, sometimes, yourself. Conclusion. This book asks for one core shift in how you see influence itself. Stop assuming good intentions and hard work speak for themselves, and start paying close attention to the unspoken dynamics, timing, perception, leverage, that actually determine who gains power and who quietly loses it. Whatever you think of the book's ethics, and plenty of thoughtful readers push back hard on several of these laws, the discomfort of studying them honestly is arguably the point. Understanding how influence actually moves through rooms, whether or not you choose to use every tactic in this list, makes you far harder to manipulate by people who already know these patterns and are using them on you. Let's run through the toolkit one more time. Make the people above you look brilliant, rather than trying to outshine them. Treat a worthy rival as a resource, not just a threat. Guard your real intentions until you're ready to reveal them. Make yourself memorable, not just quietly competent. Demonstrate your point instead of arguing it. Use deliberate absence to remind people what they value about your presence. Know exactly who you're dealing with before you underestimate them. Question anything, offered completely free, and stay flexible enough that no single strategy defines you permanently. That's the whole book, distilled into patterns you'll now start noticing everywhere, in history, in the news, and in your own daily interactions. If this summary gave you something worth thinking about, hit subscribe here on The Mind Master, because we break down one book like this every single week. But don't just watch it and move on. Think back on one recent situation where you revealed your hand too early, and consider what you'd do differently next time. Turn the theory into power.